The dollar bill was wrinkled, damp from her tiny hands. She held it out like it was treasure. "Please," she whispered, "it's all I have. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from." The man she stood before barely noticed her at first. Daniel Brooks had grown used to people asking for things: money, favors, second chances. He had built a life where requests were constant and trust was rare. He owned the largest construction company in the county. People called him successful, powerful, unreachable, but no one had ever approached him like this. The little girl couldn't have been older than 7. Her sneakers were scuffed, her hair pulled into uneven braids. She stood in the lobby of his office building, dwarfed by polished marble floors and glass walls. Security had tried to stop her, but she had insisted. "I need to see the boss," she had said. Now she stood before Daniel, arm extended, offering him a single dollar. "What's this for?" he asked, his tone guarded. Her name was Eva Martinez, and she was terrified. Her mother lay in a hospital room across town, hooked to machines that hummed and blinked in steady rhythm. Eva didn't understand medical terms. She only understood that her mom hadn't woken up in 2 days. She had overheard doctors mention something about a specialist and cost. She had heard her aunt crying about bills. Eva didn't know what a specialist was, but she knew money fixed things, so she emptied her piggy bank. Daniel crouched slightly to meet her eyes. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you're the richest man in town," she said simply, "and rich people fix big problems." The lobby fell silent. Receptionists paused mid-typing. Even the security guard shifted uncomfortably. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He had spent years building distance between himself and other people's needs. After losing his own father to illness when he was young, an illness they couldn't afford to treat, he had promised himself he would never be powerless again. He succeeded, but in the process he had learned how to ignore suffering that wasn't his own. Ava's dollar trembled in the air. "My mom works 2 jobs," she continued softly. "She says we don't need help from anybody. But she can't wake up if no one helps her." The innocence in her reasoning pierced through layers of armor Daniel didn't realize he was still wearing. He could have handed her the dollar back, could have told her to speak to a charity, could have walked away. That would have been easier. Instead, he asked, "What hospital?" Her answer came quickly, rehearsed. She had repeated it in her mind all morning so she wouldn't forget. Daniel stood slowly. His assistant leaned toward him, whispering about meetings, deadlines, contracts waiting for signatures. He waved them off. Moral tension hung heavy in the air. Was this manipulation? Was he being emotionally cornered by a child? Or was this the moment he had once needed and never received? He looked at the dollar in her hand again. It wasn't just currency, it was trust. "Keep your dollar," he said quietly. "I think you might need it more than I do." Ava's face fell for half a second, misreading his words as refusal. Then he added, "But I'll come with you." The hospital smelled of antiseptic and worry. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Eva walked beside Daniel with cautious hope, her small fingers gripping the edge of his jacket. In the room, her mother looked fragile against white sheets. Machines blinked steadily. A nurse explained the situation in measured tones. A rare complication, a specialist out of state, immediate intervention needed, costly. Daniel listened without interrupting. He recognized the helplessness in that room. He had felt it once before as a boy standing outside his father's hospital room, hearing adults whisper about bills. This time he wasn't the powerless child. He stepped into the hallway and made a series of phone calls, quiet, efficient, decisive. Within hours, arrangements were made. The specialist would arrive the next morning, payment secured, logistics handled. Eva watched from a plastic chair, swinging her legs nervously. "Did my dollar help?" she asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "More than you know." The next 24 hours stretched endlessly. Eva refused to leave her mother's side. Daniel stayed longer than he planned, answering emails from the hospital cafeteria, something he hadn't done in years. When the specialist arrived and the procedure began, the waiting room felt suspended in time. Daniel found himself pacing, not because he had invested money, because he had invested hope. Hours later, the doctor emerged with tired but reassuring eyes. The procedure had worked. Recovery would take time, but she would wake up. Eva didn't scream or jump. She simply closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Daniel didn't realize he was crying until he felt the warmth on his cheek. Days later, when her mother regained consciousness, Eva placed the wrinkled dollar on the bedside table. "We don't need this anymore," she said proudly. Daniel visited once more before returning to his world of contracts and boardrooms, but something fundamental had shifted. He created a foundation that week quietly funding emergency treatments for families caught between illness and income. No press conferences, no headlines, just action. Because here's the truth, sometimes the smallest offering carries the greatest power, and a single dollar given with pure faith can awaken a heart that forgot how to feel. If this story moved you, tell me where you're watching from and share what part touched you most. And subscribe to Cinematic Whispers for more stories that remind. US compassion is the richest currency of all.